Boldwood presents Fred and Breakfast, written by Phoebe MacLeod and read by Jess Nesling. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. To my father, Andrew, who would have been mystified by the adventure. Prologue. I can still remember every detail about the day of the accident with almost photographic clarity. It was a grim winter Friday, almost 10 years ago. The skies were dark and brooding, and the classroom windows were all steamed up, although I could still see the sleet running down the outside of the glass. The heating was on full blast, and I was struggling to stay awake as Mr. Harker tried to drum the intricacies of plant reproduction into us. I remember being startled by a sharp rap of someone knocking on the classroom door, and Mr. Harker opening it to admit the head teacher, a formidable woman called Mrs. Phillips. I felt the first twinges of unease when, after a brief whispered conversation, both of them looked directly at me. But it wasn't until Mrs. Phillips asked me to accompany her to her office and bring my stuff that the unease turned to full-on dread. As I followed her along the corridors, I was desperately trying to work out what I'd done wrong. Actually, there were probably plenty of things I'd done that could lead to a summons to the head teacher's office, but I was trying to work out which one of them had been found out. On the rare occasions that I'd joined some of the other girls behind the science block for a cheeky cigarette, we'd always been careful to stuff our mouths with polos and douse ourselves thoroughly with body spray to disguise the smell. Things were also getting pretty serious between me and my boyfriend, but we hadn't actually had sex, and even if we had, it wouldn't have been in school. Eventually, we reached her office, and she opened the door and stood aside to allow me to go in before her. There were 3 other people in there, 2 police officers and another woman, and I remember assuming that they were going to arrest me, although I couldn't think why. Yes, I'd been there when Lee Reynolds used a stolen marker pen to draw a cock and balls on the bus shelter, but strictly as an observer. Surely they didn't arrest you for that. The female police officer suggested gently that I might like to sit, and it was at that moment that I noticed they were all looking pityingly at me, as if I were a sick dog that needed to be put down. The actual words were a jumble. I think my mind just wasn't able to process them. I heard, "Your mum and dad," "fatal accident," "so sorry," and "died instantly." My parents had been on their way to spend the weekend at a country park hotel and spa, a prize my mum had won in the school PTA silent auction in the summer. I found out later that the driver of an articulated lorry coming the other way had lost control on a slippery section of road, and his trailer had swung round like an enormous bat and smashed head-on into my parents' car. They hadn't stood a chance. I didn't cry. I think I was so shocked that I just shut down. I remember the woman who wasn't a police officer explaining that she was a social worker and asking whether there was anyone she could call to come and get me. Thankfully, my grandparents were already on their way to keep an eye on us while Mum and Dad were away for the weekend, so a quick phone call diverted them to my school. The female police officer took me down to the canteen to get a cup of sweet tea and some chocolate to help with the shock, while the social worker and male police officer talked to my grandparents. I still didn't cry. I remember feeling numb as I collected my coat and the remainder of my things from my locker before following my grandparents out to their car. We drove in convoy with the police and social worker to my younger sister Katie's school, where the whole grisly performance was repeated. Still, I didn't cry, even though Katie was distraught. I held her while she wept and promised I wouldn't let anything happen to her. We didn't talk about it when we got home. I don't think any of us knew what to say. Nan and Grandad busied themselves with practicalities, making sure that we were fed. None of us could comprehend the situation. I didn't even consider the pain they must have been feeling. After all, they'd just lost their daughter too. We had eggy bread and baked beans for tea. Katie and I barely touched it, even though it was one of our favourites. It was only after I had changed into my favourite fleecy onesie, turned off the light and climbed into bed that the events of the day sunk in properly and the tears came. I sobbed and sobbed. I was 14 years old. Chapter 1. Fancy a drink, Daisy? You're on holiday now. It would be rude not to. I'm so engrossed in my work that the voice takes me completely by surprise. I glance up to see my colleague Grace standing over me, with her handbag already slung over her shoulder. I cast my eyes around the office and discover that most of the desks are already empty. Is it 5:30 already? I glance at the clock in the corner of my screen. Where has the afternoon gone? Give me 10 minutes to finish this and I'll be with you. Grace settles herself at the empty desk next to mine while I focus on the spreadsheet in front of me. My job is not exactly glamorous. I'm an accounts technician at Holdsworth and Speak, a small firm of accountants based in London. Most of my work involves reconciling the books of our customers before they go to the chartered accountants, who check them, combine them with other information, and submit them to HMRC. I was lucky enough to secure an apprenticeship here 6 years ago, after my grandparents staged an intervention. Having been considered a bright child who would go far, I flunked my GCSEs spectacularly, failing everything apart from maths and English. I just lost interest in all of it, and my results reflected that. The school wrote to Nan and Grandad to explain that sixth form wasn't really an option for me, but there might be some college courses I could look at. 2 years later, after I'd been fired from a succession of low-paid jobs, we had an uncomfortable dinner where my grandparents pointed out that my current career trajectory, plus the fact that I smoked and drank my way through every pay packet, wasn't what my parents would have wanted for me. I wouldn't say that I pulled myself together overnight, but the concern on their faces was enough to make me realise that something had to change. I stopped smoking, regulated my drinking, and somehow managed to land the job here. I still wouldn't describe myself as particularly ambitious, but Mr. Holdsworth, one of the founding partners, took me under his wing and, among other things, sponsored me through the Association of Accounting Technicians qualifications, so I feel a sense of loyalty to the place. The pay is pretty good too. In the end, it's nearly a quarter of an hour before I'm ready to send the accounts on to Rob, one of the chartered accountants. I attach them to an email, write a quick note explaining what I've done, and shut down my computer. I'm ready, I tell Grace. About time. I'm dying of thirst here. She sticks out her tongue. See? Parched. Let's go and fix that then, you poor thing. I wave to Mr. Holdsworth through the glass of his office as we turn to leave, but he beckons me to join him. We're pretty informal mostly, but the two founding partners are always addressed as Mr. Holdsworth and Mr. Speak. They are also the only two people in the company to have enclosed offices. Everyone else is in the open plan section. I stick my head around the door. Is everything okay, Mr. Holdsworth? I ask him. Absolutely. I just wanted to wish you a happy holiday. How long are you off for? 2 weeks. Excellent. I hope you have a lovely time, and try not to think about work while you're away. We'll look forward to seeing you fully refreshed when you get back. Thank you, Mr. Holdsworth. It's a beautiful summer evening as we step out onto the pavement, but as I pause to tilt my head and drink in the sun, Grace grabs my arm. No time for that. Come on, we're so late there probably won't be any outdoor tables left. Grace hustles me along the busy pavements towards our usual pub, the Lord Nelson. Like a lot of pubs in the area, it's ancient and very dark inside. However, there is a tiny beer garden at the back, and we hurry through the bar to see if we can secure a table. Luckily for us, there is one left, and we quickly grab it. Chardonnay? I ask her, as I rummage in my bag for my purse. Our Friday routine is well polished. I buy the first round, she buys the second, and then we head off towards our respective stations for the commute home. Make sure he fills it up properly. I'm sure he gave me a short measure last week. Grace says this every week. I think she really believes that she ends up with a smaller glass, whereas the truth is that she just drinks much faster than me. So, tell me about your holiday. Mallorca, isn't it? Sun, sea, sex and sangria? She asks, after I've returned with the glasses and she's had her first big swig. I don't think there will be any sex. I'm going with my sister. Really? What about your boyfriend? He can't afford it. Plus, he's not really that interested in going abroad. His parents have a static caravan near Whitstable, and that's his perfect holiday destination. Fish and chips, beer he knows he likes, and everyone speaks English. So, ever since Nan and Grandad decided I was finally responsible enough to look after Katie, I do a week somewhere sunny with her, and then a few days in the caravan with Paul. He sounds quite the catch, she observes dryly. Don't be mean, he's okay. He just isn't very adventurous, you know? Do you love him? You're very quizzy tonight. What's got into you? Oh, I don't know. I think I'm just having one of my is this all there is days. Don't you ever have those? I can't say that I do, no. Really? Don't you ever look at the chartered accountants and wonder what it is that they do that makes them so much better paid than us? I reckon I could do Rob's job standing on my head. Nope. So, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? Surely you don't intend to be still working here, living with your grandparents and going on holiday with your sister. Don't you want to get married, start a family? Grace thinks that every woman's destiny is to get married and have babies. Her workspace is festooned with pictures of her husband and children, and she frequently tells me, in great detail, about their latest antics and achievements when we're getting coffee in the office kitchen or over lunch. It gets a bit wearing at times, listening to her describing the kind of happy family life that was taken away from Katie and me, but I try not to resent her for it. I remind myself that she's not doing it to be unkind. It's just normal for her, in a way that it can never be normal for me. She's been with the company for even longer than I have, and I suspect they'll have to drag her out when she reaches retirement age. However, now that her boys are at secondary school and more independent, she likes to pretend she's ambitious and on the lookout for her next opportunity. Marriage and children don't sound like the sort of things that would happen to me, and I've told her this in the past. Thankfully, I think I've dodged the conversation about whether I love Paul, which is a new one. I'm fond of him, but I'm not in love with him. It's more of a friends with benefits arrangement, if I'm honest. After Mum and Dad died, the court awarded custody of Katie and me to Nan and Grandad, and we moved from our parents' home in Essex to their home in Kent. I was enrolled in the local comprehensive school, but most of the people in my year had already formed their friendship groups, so there wasn't really a place for the traumatised teenager who spent most of her break times sobbing loudly in the toilets. They weren't horrible to me or anything. They were just wary, I suppose. Anyway, I was sitting by myself having lunch one day when this slightly geeky-looking boy asked if he could join me. We struck up a friendship. One thing led to another over time, and here we still are. To be honest, our arrangement suits me quite well. I don't think I could deal with the emotions and risks associated with falling in love. The truthful answer to Grace's question is that I have no idea where I see myself in 10 years. I don't think about it. When you've had all your hopes and dreams ripped away from you by a totally senseless and random event, any kind of planning for the future seems pretty futile. I live firmly in the here and now. My life is okay at the moment, and that is enough for me. Grace's glass is nearly empty already. I've barely touched mine. Don't wait for me, I tell her, indicating her glass. I'm only having one tonight because I've got to drive. A trip to the bar will hopefully deflect her from her current line of questioning. She looks at her glass in amazement, as if it somehow managed to empty itself. Are you sure he filled it properly? She asks. I've only had a couple of sips. I smile at her. Her idea of a sip is a generous mouthful. I sometimes wonder if she'd be better off drinking beer. At least you can get that by the pint. I did suggest it once, but she said it made her feel terribly bloated and she has a morbid fear, which I share, of having to use the toilet on the train. So we play out the same rigmarole every week. Grace expresses outrage at what she considers to be the tiny measures, and I feign sympathy. I sometimes wonder if she has a bit of a drink problem, because I know she has a couple of large glasses when she gets home every night, but she always turns up looking bright as a button each morning, so I reckon it's probably none of my business. Also, I'm very conscious that I'm not really in a position to judge her, given my history. I was right. She's completely forgotten what she was quizzing me about when she comes back from the bar, and the rest of our conversation sticks to much safer topics, mainly work gossip. Grace is convinced that Mr. Speak is having an affair with Rosemary, his PA. I think it's pretty unlikely. The only thing that I've ever seen him get excited about is numbers, and he barely seems to notice people, even her. I'm also fairly sure Rosemary is a lot younger than him, although Mr. Speak is one of those people who is almost impossible to age. She's a model of cool efficiency, always immaculately turned out with her hair in a perfect braid and not a crease on her clothes. The idea of them getting hot and sweaty together is laughable. I was watching them yesterday, she tells me conspiratorially. She was in his office, taking him through some paperwork he was supposed to be signing. She was leaning over him, and her breasts can't have been more than a couple of centimetres from his face. She's brazen, I'll give her that. If he'd turned, I reckon he'd have been buried in her cleavage. Did he turn? No. He probably saw me looking at him, didn't he? But if I hadn't been watching... Do you ever think you might be reading more into this than there is? No, they're up to no good. I'm sure of it. Perhaps you should set up a hidden camera in his office so you can watch without them knowing, I suggest, jokingly. That's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? I was kidding. Apart from the fact that you'd be fired so fast your feet wouldn't touch the ground if you were caught, I'm pretty sure it's illegal. She sighs. I suppose you're right. Shame. While I'm waiting for the bus to take me to Charing Cross, I check my phone to make sure that the trains are all on time. If one is cancelled, the train afterwards is always completely rammed full, so I avoid that and aim for a later one once things have calmed down. Thankfully, the gods are on my side tonight, and I arrive at the station with 10 minutes to spare before the train leaves. There are a few seats left, and I tuck myself into an aisle seat next to another woman. I can see a guy further down the carriage watching me as I sit down, probably hoping for a glimpse up my skirt, and I give him a defiant stare. At least he has the grace to blush slightly as he hurriedly diverts his eyes back to his laptop screen. As the train pulls out of the station, I start making a mental list of the things I need to pack when I get home. I bought plenty of sunscreen earlier in the week, and Katie and I went shopping last weekend to treat ourselves to a holiday wardrobe refresh, so I've got 2 new swimsuits as well as a selection of shorts and t-shirts. Most of it is in a pile in the corner of my bedroom, so all I need to do is stuff it into my case and ensure I've got our passports, travel insurance, and money. After I've run through the list a couple of times in my head, I start to relax a little. I think I'm ready for this break. Chapter 2. There's more of a rush than usual as my fellow commuters and I disembark at Paddock Wood Station. We have to climb a long staircase to the bridge over the tracks and then back down the other side to reach the car park. This is normally a weary trudge, but because it's Friday, everyone is anxious to get home and begin their weekends. Some of them are so keen they're bounding up the steps 2 at a time. I keep well to the side and grip the handrail firmly. The last thing I want to do is fall and break my leg just before I go on holiday. When I reach the safety of the ground, I leave my car in the car park and walk straight out of the station towards the Chinese takeaway in the town. As I walk through the door, the woman behind the counter smiles at me. "Hello, Miss Daisy. Your order is all ready for you." This is part of my Friday routine. I call in our order from the train, so it's ready for me to collect when I arrive. I don't even need to list what I want. We have the same things every week, so I just ask for my usual. I hand over my card with a smile, enter my PIN, and watch as the transaction goes through. "I hope you enjoy it," she says as she hands me the bag. "See you next week?" "No, I'm on holiday for a couple of weeks, but I'll see you when I get back," I promise her. Normally, I pop into the off-licence a couple of doors down and pick up a bottle of wine, but as I'm not staying at Paul's tonight, I walk straight past. I'm outside his flat a few minutes later. "Hiya," he says, as he opens the door to let me in. "I've got the plates warming in the oven." "No wine tonight?" "No, I'm not staying. I told you, remember?" "Oh yes, sorry. Early start." We unpack the takeaway bag and load up our plates. I've got sesame prawn toasts and chicken curry, while Paul has spring rolls and sweet and sour prawn balls. We divide the rice between us and sit down at his tiny, rickety table. As we eat, he fills me in on his week, and I tell him about Grace's latest theories about Mr. Speak and Rosemary. Unlike me, Paul stayed on at school to do his A-levels, but his results were far from stellar, and he's worked in a mobile phone shop in Tonbridge for the last 6 years. He was promoted to manager 2 years ago and took the opportunity to move out of his parents' house into his rented 1-bed flat in Paddock Wood as a reward. It's a typical man cave. The main room contains a huge TV with surround sound, a PlayStation with a wide array of games, a squishy leather sofa, and the table at which we're currently sitting. There are a couple of cheap prints on the walls and a rug to hide the bit of floor where the carpet has worn through. The kitchen has definitely seen better days, but Paul's landlord is adamant that there's nothing wrong with it, even though a couple of the cupboard doors are missing, and there's a special technique to opening and closing the cutlery drawer without it falling off its runners and emptying itself all over the floor. After we've finished eating, I relax on the sofa while Paul washes up. I turn on the TV and start flicking through the channels, but nothing grabs me. Paul flops down next to me and puts his arm around me. Our sex life, like everything else, is utterly predictable. I reckon I could set a timer and he'd be totally consistent every week. 1 minute with his arm around my shoulders, then he'll move to gently stroking my arm for a couple of minutes, catching an occasional brush of the side of my boob as he does. If I don't move away, which I pretty much never do, the brushing of the side of my boob will get more frequent until he moves his hand completely and begins cupping and squeezing. Every move happens in exactly the same way every time, as if it's one of those incredibly complex recipes you see on MasterChef where you have to do everything exactly by the book or the whole thing is ruined. The only variety is whether we stay where we are or move into the bedroom. From his moves, it looks like tonight is going to be a sofa night. I've noticed recently that the only time he ever kisses me now is as part of the run-up to sex. We used to kiss all the time when we first got together, but I guess he doesn't see the point anymore unless it's leading to something. It's a shame, really. I quite enjoy kissing him, even if the actual sex often leaves a bit to be desired on my side. Afterwards, I pick up my clothes and wander into his bathroom to sort myself out and get dressed. It's much like the rest of the flat. The ancient bath is discoloured and several of the tiles are cracked. There's an electric shower over the bath, and the shower curtain is so thin it's practically see-through. Thankfully, as I'm not staying over tonight, I won't need to try to wash myself tomorrow morning in the pathetic dribble that the shower emits. I sit on the toilet, rinse my mouth out with a little of Paul's mouthwash, and climb into my clothes before checking the time. 9:30. It's still light as I leave Paul's flat, which is a relief, as I don't really like wandering around the station car park in the dark. In winter, I'm always careful to park my car as close as I can to one of the overhead lights so as to minimise the risk of someone being able to hide in the shadows and jump out at me. The car park is nearly empty at this time of night on a Friday, and I hurry over to my car, pressing the button to unlock the door at the last minute and throwing myself in. For someone who doesn't particularly like driving, I spend a fortune on cars. My dad was the opposite, and one of the findings from the inquest was that the battered old Toyota that he'd nursed to nearly 250,000 miles simply folded up like a pack of cards in the impact, giving them no protection at all. As a result, I buy a brand new car every couple of years to make sure I've got all the latest safety features. According to Grant, the salesman I deal with each time, this one has so many airbags that it would basically transform into the automotive equivalent of a bouncy castle if I were unfortunate enough to hit anything. That doesn't stop my palms from sweating a bit whenever I encounter a large truck coming the other way, though. I pull up on the drive of my grandparents' bungalow in Five Oak Green just before 10. They moved here in the 80s, and the decorative style hasn't been updated since. Think chintz, pastel colours, bathroom units in pink or avocado, and you're pretty much there. It was only a few years ago that their beloved waterbed sprung a leak and had to be replaced with something more conventional. At least they redecorated Katie's and my bedrooms when we moved in, and they made it clear that they were happy for us to update them as we wanted to over the last 10 years. They did put their foot down when I decided I wanted to paint all of my walls black when I was 17, but apart from that, they've been pretty accommodating. My room is currently sporting a very neutral palette, with magnolia walls, biscuit carpet, and terracotta curtains. Katie says it's dull and that I should have patterned curtains at least, but I find the blocks of colour restful. She's not exactly in a position to criticise, as her room has the same floral wallpaper and pink curtains that she chose when we first moved in. They're all in the living room when I walk through the door, so I give Nan and Grandad a kiss each and then settle on the sofa next to Katie. All set for tomorrow? I ask her. Yep, I think I've packed for every possibility except snow. I was just going to pack shorts, t-shirts and swimming costumes, but Nan kept coming in and muttering darkly about layers, so my case is probably twice as heavy as it needs to be. She smiles. It's better to be prepared, that's all I said, Nan admonishes her. Nan, you do know the forecast is wall-to-wall sunshine and temperatures in the high 20s for the whole of next week, don't you? Yes, but the forecast can be wrong, can't it? Just look at poor old Michael Fish and the hurricane in 1987. I think you'll find that the science of predicting the weather has improved a little since then, Nan. Come on, I say to Katie. Let's go and have a look at your case. If you didn't know us, you might struggle to figure out that Katie and I are sisters because we're so different. We both have dark brown hair and blue eyes, but that's pretty much where the resemblance stops. I'm quite curvy with a round face, large breasts and wide hips, whereas she is more androgynous and athletic looking. She's also slightly taller than me and wears round, heavy-framed glasses that give her a scholarly air. I show my emotions easily, but she is quiet and reserved. After the initial shock, we reacted completely differently to the deaths of our parents. While I went off the rails, she buried herself in her schoolwork, so it was no surprise when she passed all her GCSEs with either A's or A stars. From the way things are heading, it looks like she'll repeat the trick for her A-levels next year, which means she'll hopefully have her pick of universities. I'm trying not to think about that too much. I want the best for her, obviously, but I also know that I'll miss her terribly when she goes. Katie opens up her suitcase and we go through it together, taking out the thick jumpers, long trousers, and coat that Nan insisted she packed. When we're done, she has 3 bikinis, lots of t-shirts, a couple of pairs of shorts, and a light dress for the evenings, as well as underwear and a couple of pairs of pyjamas. I take the opportunity to shove some of the insect repellent and sunscreen I've bought into the space we've created in her case, before retreating to my room to finish off my own packing. I hear the sounds of Nan and Grandad locking up and getting ready for bed, so I stick my head out of the door to wish them good night. We'll be gone before they wake up, so they wish us a lovely holiday and exhort me to take care of Katie. "Remember, she's only 17, Daisy. I don't want her out at nightclubs dancing with unsuitable boys," Nan tells me firmly. "I think you're quite safe there, Nan," I laugh. "Apart from the fact that my clubbing days are many years behind me, I don't think nightclubs are really Katie's scene, do you?" Katie's head pops out from her bedroom door. "I heard that." "It's true though, isn't it?" I challenge her. "I can no more imagine you dirty dancing than I can imagine Nan here." "I don't know," Nan muses as she gives a little wiggle. "There's still life in the old girl, you know." "Nonsense," Grandad laughs. "You'd probably put your hip out as soon as you got onto the dance floor, and we'd have to call an ambulance to take you to A&E. "Well, just be careful while you're away, that's all I'm saying. Have a lovely time, but don't overdo it." "We'll be fine, Nan. Stop worrying. See you when we get back." Nan and Grandad haven't been abroad since we moved in. To begin with, they had their hands full just coping with me, and, as Nan explains regularly, "You were difficult enough to handle on home territory. How on earth would we have managed in a foreign country where we had no means of tracking you down at all?" We are close now, but the first few years were very rocky, and there were plenty of stand-up rows that ended with me storming out of the house yelling, "You're not my mother!" I finish my packing, double-check that I've got all the documents we need, and then get ready for bed. As my head hits the pillow, I allow myself to look forward to the week ahead. Just a little bit. Chapter 3. I'm still fast asleep when the alarm goes off at 4:30 a.m, so I wake with a start, and it takes me a moment or two to orient myself. I drag myself out of bed and knock on Katie's door to check she's awake, before padding down the corridor to the bathroom. Nan and Grandad have an ensuite bathroom off their bedroom, so Katie and I have this one to ourselves. As I wash the sleep away in the shower, I run through my checklist one more time to make sure there's nothing I've forgotten. As well as a morbid fear of needing to wee on the train, I'm terrified of being turned away at check-in or the hotel because of a missing piece of paper. Half an hour later, our cases are loaded into the boot of my car and we've checked the documents several times. I close the door as quietly as I can behind us and we set off for the airport. Grandad pointed out that it would have been considerably cheaper for us to go by taxi than pay for the parking, but I'm not wild about being driven on the motorway by a stranger in a car of unknown age that's probably done what Rob at work would refer to as starship mileage. At least I'm in control if I'm driving. The traffic is very light at this time on a Saturday morning, and we're on the airport road less than an hour later. "Read me the instructions for the car park again," I tell Katie. "It's easy. You just need to pull up to the barrier and it will recognise your number plate from the booking and print your ticket," she replies. "No, read me exactly what it says on the piece of paper. I want to be sure I haven't missed anything, like a button we have to press or something." She rolls her eyes, but obliges. We manage to get into the car park with no issues and drag our cases to the bus stop, where there is already a large group of people waiting. "Wow, there are a lot more people here than I was expecting for this time in the morning," Katie remarks. I expect it will be heaving in the terminal then. First week of the school holidays, so everyone's going away." Sure enough, the queues in the terminal building are massive, and it takes us a good hour to reach the self-check-in desks. Between us, we managed to work out how to print our boarding cards and baggage tags before loading our bags onto the conveyor that will take them deep into the guts of the airport and, hopefully, onto our plane. Another long queue snakes its way through security, but we finally find ourselves in the departure lounge just over an hour before our flight is due to take off. "Breakfast?" I suggest. "Absolutely, I'm starving." We settle ourselves at a table in the terminal pub and order a couple of full English breakfasts. We probably won't eat again until this evening, so we've decided we need something substantial to keep us going. While we're waiting for our food to arrive, I glance around at our fellow travellers. There are lots of families with children, obviously filling themselves up before the journey like we are, but there are also a couple of groups of young men already sinking pints despite the fact that it's not even 8 o'clock in the morning. "What do you reckon? Stag parties?" I ask Katie, indicating the men. She wrinkles her nose as the men in one group start whooping loudly, encouraging the guy that I guess is the bridegroom-to-be to down his pint in one. A few of the parents in the family groups make eye contact with each other and raise their eyebrows disapprovingly. "I hope they're not on our plane," she remarks. "I doubt they're going to Majorca. More likely to be Warsaw or Prague, I suspect. Somewhere not too far away where the beer is strong and relatively cheap." A last call announcement comes over the intercom for an EasyJet flight to Warsaw, and one of the men shouts, "Fuck, that's our plane!" to his mates. I smile as they hastily grab their belongings and start running towards the gate. "One group down, just got to see where the others are going," I observe. Unfortunately for us, it turns out that the other group is going to Majorca, and one of them is sitting next to me on the plane. I'm not a fan of beery breath at the best of times, but it's particularly hard to stomach first thing in the morning. I turn away from him to try to avoid getting a lungful. "All right, ladies, off on your holidays?" I sigh. Ignoring him is obviously not going to be an option, so I steel myself for a trying couple of hours making small talk with my semi-plastered neighbour. I'm quickly proved wrong, though, as apart from the occasional strong whiff of beer, he's actually good company. He introduces himself as Mike, the best man on the stag do. He points out the bridegroom, who is sitting a few rows in front, and the rest of the party, although it's not hard to work out who they are from the amount of noise they're making. I learn that the wedding is in 2 weeks, and they've rented a villa for a few days for the stag. They're planning to swim, drink, and generally take it easy. He asks about us and is genuinely surprised when I tell him that we're sisters. The 2 hours pass quite quickly, and before I know it, we're descending into Parma. The immigration queue is not quite as long as the one we encountered at check-in, but it still takes us over half an hour to get through into the baggage hall. I locate the carousel, and I'm relieved to see that our bags are patiently circling, waiting for us to pick them up. I always have a niggle of worry that they will have somehow found their way onto the wrong plane and not going to arrive, and we'll be stuck in a foreign country with nothing but the clothes on our backs. As we come out into the arrivals hall, I see Mike and the rest of the stag party negotiating with a couple of taxi drivers, and I give him a farewell wave. Katie and I follow the majority of the other holidaymakers towards the transfer buses. "That guy on the plane was totally flirting with you," Katie remarks after we've found our bus and clambered aboard. "I don't think so," I reply. "He was wearing a wedding ring for starters. I reckon he was just being friendly." "I'm not so sure. I think he was hoping for a bit of what goes on tour stays on tour action." "Yuck! Where on earth did you learn that phrase?" "Where do you think? Idiot rugby boys boasting at school. They like to hint that they've got up to all these amazing exploits, but I bet it's nothing more than a couple of sneaky cans of lager and a bromantic snog in the hot tub." "Ouch." "Honestly, you should hear them. How some of them manage to get into sixth form is a total mystery to me." "So nobody's caught your eye then?" "No, it turns out boys are just as stupid and immature in the sixth form as they were in the lower school." Typically, our hotel is pretty much at the end of the bus route, but I don't mind too much as it gives me a chance to check out where other people are staying. The first few hotels we stop at, fairly close to the airport, are pretty grotty, but the standard seems to improve the further we go. Katie and I are booked into the 4-star Villa Blanca, and as the bus finally turns into the driveway of our hotel, I sigh with pleasure. It looks amazing. The gardens are well tended, with green lawns and brightly coloured flower beds. We're checked in quickly and efficiently, and I gasp with delight as I swipe the keycard and open the door of our room. It's massive, with an enormous double bed against one wall, a separate seating area with table, sofa and chairs, and sliding glass doors that lead out onto the balcony. The air conditioning is running, so it's pleasantly cool in here. I stick my head into the bathroom to discover a good-sized tub and a separate walk-in shower with one of those rainfall heads. I think we'll be able to put up with this for a week, don't you? I call to Katie, who has stepped out onto the balcony. Come out here and check out the view, she calls back. I slide open the insect screen and step outside. It's beautifully warm out here, without being stifling, and there's a gentle breeze. The balcony looks out towards the hotel's private beach and the sea beyond. The hotel and beach are in a bay, so the water is calm and the sea is just lapping gently at the sand. Only around half of the sun lounges appear to be occupied, and there are a number of people swimming in the water. Further out into the bay, there are a few anchored boats bobbing lazily. It's perfect. Let's get our costumes on and hit the beach, I suggest. Katie doesn't need telling twice, and after slathering on some Factor 50 sun cream, we pack a bag with our beach towels, more sunscreen and books, and follow the signs. I kick off my shoes as soon as we get there and enjoy the sensation of the warm sand against my feet. We take up position on a couple of free sun lounges and I pull out my book. The rest of the afternoon passes very pleasantly. We read, swim in the sea, and chat about nothing in particular. What's the deal with Paul? Katie asks as we're making our way back up to our room to get changed for dinner. The hotel is all-inclusive, with a number of different dining options, but we've decided to pile our plates high at the main buffet tonight. Breakfast was a long time ago, and we're both starving. What do you mean? I reply. Do you think you'll get married? I doubt it. I think we'll probably just carry on as we are until one of us finds someone we like better, and that will be it. That sounds a bit depressing. Aren't you in love with him? Do you know, you're the second person to ask me that in as many days. What is this, quiz Daisy about her boyfriend week? Sorry, I wasn't trying to pry. I'm just interested. Because? Well, because you two have been together forever. I heard Nan and Grandad talking about it the other day, speculating about whether you'd move out to live with him. No, I don't think I could live with him. He's a good guy, but I don't really share any of his interests, and his flat is a bit of a shithole. Besides, I couldn't leave you behind. I put my arm around her and give her a squeeze, and she rests her head on my shoulder. Looks like Nan and Grandad are going to have to put up with us for a few years longer then, doesn't it? She replies. The buffet is reasonably busy when we arrive, but we're still able to find a free table without too much difficulty. A waiter comes to take our drinks order, and then we set off to see what we can find to eat. My stomach rumbles in anticipation as I walk around the various stations, helping myself to paella and a selection of salads. Our drinks are waiting for us when we get back to the table, and we drink a toast to a happy holiday. The food is delicious, and we eat pretty much in silence. God, I feel fat, I exclaim, popping open the button of my jeans to relieve the pressure as I slump down on the bed later that evening. I definitely ate too much. It was the puddings, especially that chocolate one. I couldn't get enough of that, Katie agrees. I don't know about you, but the travelling and then all the sunshine this afternoon followed by that sumptuous dinner has really taken it out of me. I'm knackered. I think I'll have an early night. I cover my mouth as I yawn widely. Yeah, I'm pretty tired as well. It's been nice, though. I'm looking forward to the rest of the week. Me too, I tell her. We get changed, brush our teeth, and climb into the bed. Normally, it takes me ages to get to sleep on the first night in a strange bed, but this one is so comfortable that I'm asleep before I know it. Chapter 4. Excuse me, we're going to play beach volleyball. Would you like to join us? Katie and I lift our heads from our books. The boy in front of us is tall, very skinny, and, if I've got his accent right, German. He looks around 16 but has one of those faces that make it difficult to tell. He's pointing behind him, where a group of teens and 20-somethings have set up a net and are obviously getting ready to play. Thank you, I say to him, but I'm going to say no. Enjoy your game, though. Even if I wanted to play, which I don't, the reality is that I don't think my bikini top could take the strain of trying to contain my boobs if I were jumping and leaping about. I definitely don't want to end up giving a load of strangers an accidental eyeful. I also have no hand-to-eye coordination where ball sports are concerned, so I probably just annoy them with my lack of ability. He nods and turns to Katie. I fully expect her to say no as well, but she surprises me. "Yeah, why not?" she says. "I need to do something to counteract all the food." "Excellent. My name is Mark. Please, come and meet the rest of the group." I watch in amazement as my shy, bookish sister follows him across the sand. She smiles and shakes hands with everyone as he introduces her to the other young men and women. I set my book down and continue watching as they organise themselves into 2 teams and begin the game. Katie is a little tentative to begin with, but I can see her confidence increasing as she gets the hang of it. They seem like a nice crowd, and they are very encouraging. By the end, she's leaping and hitting the ball as enthusiastically as the rest of them, with her long, lithe limbs powering her across the sand. She looks alive in a way I don't think I've seen before. I can't help smiling as I look at her. I know I'm biased, but she's turning into a beautiful young woman.